Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chorizo Bros. Back at it again with another solo book review for now. So I've been really lucky to have discovered a couple of new authors in the past couple of weeks or so, and knocked their books out and got 5 out of 5s on them. So I've been super lucky. There were some authors that I'd never heard of before, and read their books and absolutely loved them. So one of them is James by Percival Everett, and me. I think Arian's going to come back on the show, Brandon as well, and we're going to do a sort of discussion about James, how it pertains to Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. That's coming. But the other one, and this is sort of a author I discovered through watching YouTube videos. I watched this video about Butcher's Crossing, which is supposed to be a very dark, very, very dark Western novel, not unlike Blood Meridian. It's supposed to have this reputation. So I was interested in this author. I was like, okay, who wrote this book? What is going on with this Butcher's Crossing? It sounds like an insane book. Have not read that yet. But I found a very cheap copy of Nothing But the Night, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And 5 out of 5, straight out of the way. I think I'm just gonna go into this video with the expectation that you've read it or don't give a shit about spoilers, because that's just I'm just gonna talk. I'm gonna discuss some of my favorite things about it and why I really enjoyed it, what made me interested in trying some of his other novels coming up, and that's kind of where we are. Basically, if you're into poignant, sad stories, dark stories, damaged characters, psychologically fucked up people, and that sort of introspective foray into their mind, into their thoughts, you're gonna love this. If that's not really your thing, if you need a little bit more, if you need more plot, if you need more adventure, more action, this isn't gonna really work for you. This is really more so an examination of a disturbed individual and what's going on inside them and how they got there. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about Nothing But the Night by John Williams. There's an interview at the end of this book. It's John Williams' wife. Her name is Nancy Gardner Williams. I found it to be a nice punctuation to the end of the book. It was pretty cool to kind of go through and see a little bit about what was going on in his personal life that led him to writing his debut novel, which is what this is. It was like, whoa, a lot of pieces fell into place after reading this interview. It was very nice that they added that at the end of this copy of Nothing But the Night, a very short description of what's going on in this book, a little bit about the plot, a little bit about what the story is. So our protagonist, Arthur Maxley, it's sort of taking place throughout just one day, and it starts off with this nightmare. And the way he explains this nightmare is, it's gut wrenching. It really gets in your skin. It's like it's been a while since I read a description of what a nightmare is and have it really reach into what it feels like to go through a nightmare. Have you ever woken up from a nightmare sweating and terrified and just groggily trying to understand what just happened to you when you were sleeping? He really captures that in the first chapter of this book. And basically, it's going through this day where he gets a letter from his father asking to meet up. Now, it's hinted very early on that some traumatic event is really messing with him. And you see what his life is. You see that this college dropout character, Arthur Maxley, is struggling deep with alcoholism and psychological damage, which is crazy because we just came off of talking about Charles Bukowski. And while that has a bit of sadness to it, it is written almost like an expression of it's like an expression of humor. This is not that. There's nothing funny about what's going on here. This is a terrifying depiction of somebody that's dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. It is on the nose what that is. So he gets this letter from his father, and he's like dreading this memory popping up in his head, and you don't know what it is. And it's hinted at throughout the course of his day. He meets with an old friend of his who ends up being kind of an asshole and being like, "Hey, let me borrow some money. I know you have it." He kind of doesn't. He's kind of living off of his father. And then at the end of it, he's like, "Why can't you just ask your dad for me to loan me some money, and so I can start a printing press and start a poetry publication, which is really funny. I don't know why that's funny, but so that's how it starts off, and then you get this idea that he's getting, triggered, and that's like this thing that didn't really exist back then. They didn't have this like concept of PTSD and like how it affects you and like what's going on, how some outward things can start you up into this like anxiety and this panic. And he does a really good job of sort of explaining what that feels like. So this feels in a way a little bit autobiographical. I don't It's not, but it feels like he really understands his character to its core, the way John Williams writes Arthur Maxley. That's kind of like what the driving force of this novel is. It's sort of reminding you where he's coming from in all this, and there would be these memories of listening to his mother play piano, and how like it's described as almost not to be Oedipal, but it's almost described in a romantic way. This pure just love, and he would talk about this feeling he would get when he would be in his room and he'd listen to his mom play piano, and then she'd come in and give him a goodnight kiss, and it was just this beautiful like experience he had. And then you could tell, okay, what happened then, because there's this hint at this trauma, and you think that his father's the root cause of it because of the way he's behaving and the way he's sort of flippant about his father, how he doesn't want to talk to him, how he decides to, okay, I'll go and have dinner with him and whatever. And then in the conversation that they have, you sort of get this vibe that like his father's really trying to reach him, and he's putting these walls up, and man, like it really hits on like the human element of loss and of trauma and of guilt and all these things. And you can really tell that our protagonist is not dealing with it well. So he ends up going to like a club later, and he meets a woman there, and it describes like getting drunk, really drunk with this lady. And the climax of the story is sort of him going home with her after remembering what he's been trying to block out was his experience with his mother, who shoots her father. He survives, obviously. They have dinner later, and then she kills herself. And it's horrible how he witnessed this, and he's been sort of dealing with it poorly the whole time. And so he hangs out with this woman, he has this experience, and then it culminates into like this terrible experience for him, and it ends with him just like in a gutter. So yeah, it's a rough novel. It's terrifying how he describes sort of, I don't know if I call them hallucinations, but it's sort of his view of the world around him and why he feels like it's threatening. So let me go ahead and read a part from here. This is at the very beginning of the novel. He goes and orders breakfast at a restaurant. And I just really like, just to give you an idea of how this writer works, right? Also, why I have the Tabasco on the table. He orders eggs with Tabasco. From the chip blue plate, the egg stared up at him like a knowing evil eye. At first, he was amused by the fancy, but as he stared longer, and as the yellow eye glared back at him, he became acutely uncomfortable. He blinked rapidly, and still the yellow pupil stared senselessly at him from its greasy white orb. He reached for the bottle of Tabasco sauce and poured a bit of the fiery red liquid on the eye. As if it were suddenly irritated beyond all endurance, the white surrounding matter became alarmingly bloodshot and developed a network of liquidly shifting veins, changing the vacant expression into something almost frightening. It looked up at him reproachfully, as if in great agony. So that's a hell of a way to describe having breakfast. Putting some Tabasco sauce on a sunny side up egg, I guess. Yeah, it's frightening, and that's sort of how most of this book goes. It's like, again, everything feels threatening. It's an entertaining novel to read. It embodies that having a bad day, walking around, and no matter what is going on around you, it seems to not be good. And those of you that have felt that before, if you've gone and had an experience that made you feel crummy for a long time, depression, whatever it might be. He really captures that feeling, and I really like that. The whole book is that. So I was just entranced by the language he was using, and and it's in this like nondescript location. You don't know what city he's in. It kind of feels like it could be anywhere, and I really like that. It really sort of made me feel like, have I walked around like that? Have I sort of been staring at my food and like felt this awful feeling and not being sure why, or not comprehending the feeling that I'm having? I feel like everyone can relate in a way, and thumbs up all the way around on this. So part of what happens at the end of this book, once it's finished, and it's the interview with his wife, she explains that John, he was in the Army Air Force, and he gets shot down. His plane gets shot down. I think it's something like 5 of the guys that were in the plane died, and he's one of the survivors. And he went through life after that having this like survivor's guilt, having this, obviously it's a traumatic experience, without the death or with it, but having him survive and not knowing like why was he spared, does he deserve it more than the other guys, like she really explains that that's what he was feeling and what he was going through with it, because he didn't come from good financial means. She explains that, well, he was able to go to university because of his being in the army. So there's like this weird, he wouldn't have become this professor, he wouldn't have become this writer, we wouldn't have had his art had he not gone through that. And that's kind of a, it's kind of a strange way to look at it, and really sad way to look at it, that some of the best artists have suffered, have really suffered. He talks about his struggle with malaria. There's a part where, because he was shot down in that plane, he's not able to be in active duty, and that's when he put this book together. He wrote this during that experience, and so he was writing this, and then him and his some of his comrades there decide to go find the dog tags of some of the lost soldiers. So yeah, it's kind of a lot. And this book has nothing to do with military or fighting or anything like that. This is just kind of like a psychological drama, torture almost. So yeah, and then it explains that he was 22 when he wrote this. That's incredible. So I'm finding that it does very much feel like a debut novel, and I don't mean that in a bad way. This got a 5 out of 5 after all. Um, but it did make me go, all right, well, he's, most of us book readers out there are gonna know him from Butcher's Crossing. But there's other novels that he wrote, and I'm excited to see what those are, and excited to go further with his work. He's got one called Stoner. I think it says on the front, author of Stoner. One called Augustus, Butcher's Crossing, of course. I think there's a couple other ones that I'm not remembering at the moment, but there's a lot to like here. I'm ready to read more. So yeah, I think that on that, check the book out again. It's a pretty short video, nothing too crazy here. But yeah, we are going to be bringing you, got my corncob pipe, at some point, a pretty big discussion of Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and then James. This is incredible, guys. Check this out too. We're going to talk about it for sure. But yeah, that's where we're at, and that's kind of why I haven't been bringing videos, is because I've been knocking all this out in preparation for an upcoming video, and then Art, Jeremy, and I should be bringing you another Larry McMurtry, and I think we're going to talk about The Matrix at some point. So we should be bringing you some fun stuff. So basically, that's kind of where we're at on the show. I don't know what I'm going to be reading next. Hopefully, something enjoyable. How am I going to get? How am I going to be lucky enough to get 2 5 out of 5s back to back? That's incredible. I mean, that like never happens. So yeah, very excited to get some reading done, get some watching some movies done, and that's kind of where we're at, guys. I think I ought to get out of here and let y'all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me. Leave some comments. Tell me what I should read next. Tell me what I should watch next. Tell me what I got wrong, if I missed something, or if there's something really interesting that I didn't touch on. But on that note, I think I'm going to get out of here, you guys. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.